thank you everyone for being here this evening, our first in-person meeting of the year. And before we begin, I have one announcement. We will be canceling the scheduled 4 p.m. Work session on March 8th. With a retreat coming up later this week on Friday and Saturday, and a budget work session already scheduled for March 14th, staff has asked that we not meet for that afternoon work session this month. So everybody can note that, please, on their calendars. So our first item to evening is a joint hearing with the Raleigh Historic Development Commission. Can folks from the Development Commission please raise your hands? Okay, we have a quorum this evening. Thank you. All right. Tanya, are you ready to go?
Thank you. Good evening. I am Tanya Tully with Planning and Development. The city has received 2 applications for historic landmark designation, on which I will make a brief presentation. But before I do, I want to recognize, well, you already did, the commissioners present, especially Chair Gaston Williams. The RHDC has reviewed the reports and found that the properties meet the criteria for designation. They were referred by City Council to the North Carolina Department of Cultural Resources as required by statute. After closing the public hearings, the request is for you to refer the matter back to the RHDC to consider the comments of the state of North Carolina and any additional information received during the public hearings. Do you want me to just do both presentations at once?
Please.
Okay, great. First, we have Pittysmont, also known as the William Hand Brown House, at 2822 Van Dyke Avenue. It was constructed in 1916. Pittysmont is architecturally significant as an excellent and intact example of a bungalow with rustic-style architecture. Architectural details including a shingled exterior, rusticated timber porch posts, and diamond-light wood sash windows. At the time of construction, Van Dyke Avenue had not yet been laid out, and the house was built facing west toward Dixie Trail. Despite the proliferation of bungalows throughout Raleigh, Pittysmont stands out architecturally, particularly when compared with its neighboring bungalows in the West Raleigh Historic District. Pittysmont has experienced very few alterations, the most significant change being the removal of the dormer on the north elevation facing the rear yard. Despite the loss of that one dormer, Pittysmont retains a remarkably high level of architectural integrity. Next, we have the Mordecai Whitehall, located at 1322 Mordecai Drive. It was constructed in 1925. The Mordecai Whitehall is architecturally significant as an excellent and intact example of a Sears Kent house, the design known as the Whitehall. In the early 20th century, many companies began to produce and promote kit houses, standard plans for which materials were shipped and assembled. In 2013, RHDC commissioned a historical context, an argument for the designation of kit houses, and the Mordecai Whitehall meets several of the criteria established in that context document. It is authenticated as a genuine kit home from an established company. It is an excellent example of its kit home model. It largely maintains its original massing style and materials, and is located in one of Raleigh's early suburbs, which helps document the city's period of growth in the early 20th century and the heyday of the kit home industry. Also of note, the house appears to have been built by developer Virginia Newsom Nowell between 1922 and 23. Ms. Nowell purchased 60 lots in the Mordecai Place neighborhood. By 1926, she had constructed about 50 residences and apartment houses. Though her career as a developer seems to have been brief, the history of this house includes the impact of entrepreneurial women like Virginia Nowell in Raleigh's growth and development. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. I need to then open the hearing. Is there anyone here to speak on this matter? Could you please come to the front and give your name and address?
Mayor, just quickly, we probably need to have a public hearing on each one of those.
Okay, so this This is the first one then, Van Dyke Avenue. Anyone here to speak on Van Dyke?
I do believe the property owner sent an email out because they are not able to be here this evening.
Okay, thank you. Close it then. Okay, no one is here to speak on this. I will close it. Close the hearing. Do we have a motion? What?
Madam Mayor, do you want to do them both, and then we refer these back to the committee?
She said I have to do separate. So I'm closing this hearing. If we could have a
I move
motion.
for approval to referral back to the RHDC.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Mayor Pro Tem Stewart. Okay, all in favor? Aye. All right, thank you. Next, we'll open up the hearing on Mordecai Drive. Now you can come up. Name and address for the record, please.
Thank you all, council. My name is Paul Fife. I am one of the homeowners at 1322 Mordecai Drive. And I'm just delighted that RHDC helped us put this forward and delighted for you all to consider it. We were so lucky to be able to come into ownership of this house and really appreciate this program as one way of helping keep protected into the future, even beyond our tenure there, especially when we see in downtown Raleigh, in these neighborhoods, such accelerated development and change. It's more important now than ever to consider what tools we have to protect these historical structures and history that they indicate, especially with the Whitehall, the development of Raleigh's, one of its first suburbs, which is kind of amazing now in retrospect. So anyway, I just want to express my enthusiasm and gratitude, and thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here. Any other speakers? All right, I will close the hearing. Do we have a motion?
I move to refer the matter to RHDC. Yes.
Do we, it's seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Stewart. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Next, we have public comment. We will start 2 minutes per person. Please make sure the timer is set. And we will start with Chantel Miles. Chantel here this evening? Okay, next is Christina Jones.
Hold on.
Christina Jones.
Christina Jones, 8005 Finland Drive. What does engagement mean to you? I was on the Midtown CAC meeting last night, and we had a budget presentation from Mary Vigu. The city's annual budget survey begins today, and I asked her what the metrics are for public participation. As I figured, there aren't any. So I then went ahead and asked how many participants filled it out last year, and the total was 1,400. Together, we came up with a goal of 2,000 surveys for residents to submit this year in order for us to know we are working hard at engaging the population. Now we have an attainable goal that residents can help push out to ensure that engagement grows. As I am part of many different groups that hear presentations from various city departments, I think this is a very specific analytic that can be measured across the board to show how the city is doing with outreach. While it is nice to be getting back to some sense of normal, we cannot forget the lessons we have learned through COVID. A big one for me is that I have been able to be present at City Council and with my family for dinner. By taking away that option of virtual participation, you have made it an either-or decision for many of us. The inclusivity you say you want is being halted right out of the gate. You have an opportunity to be the leaders in this field of public participation and not just follow the crowd. When asked about this during the last council meeting, it was said that since it is not stated in the law, the assumption is that it is against the law to include virtual comment. Change the game. Lead. Include those of us who desperately want to be part of the conversation but don't want to sacrifice family in order to be here. And so I ask again, what does engagement mean to you?
Thank you. Next, we have Curtis Johnson. Is Mr. Johnson here? Next, we have Haley Kinsler.
Haley Kinsler, 804 Gorman Street, Apartment C. I want to begin by mentioning that despite meeting in person, we as citizens of Raleigh are still facing barriers in community engagement. For one, these meetings should be accessible to all people in the city, including immunocompromised people, disabled people, working people, and everyone for whom a hybrid online option is needed. You use the words community engagement often, but they have no meaning behind them when you refuse to create the circumstances in which all of the public can attend these meetings. Is it only community engagement when you can put someone else as a barrier between you and the people? You might be ready to move to in-person meetings, but there are so many others for whom that is not an option, and you were elected to care for those people. How are you caring for them now? Similarly, how are you caring for those who do manage to attend these meetings in person? I was not told until 6 hours ago that my time for public comment was being cut. Why am I being notified of this on such short notice? The deadline to sign up was last Friday at 5. Need I remind you of your own rules? I should have been notified of this earlier, given that you have known since then how many speakers there would be. If we are required to adhere to a deadline, the city should also notify us of changes in a timely manner. Why is it that you cannot spare more than 2 minutes of your time to listen to my comment, but as aptly pointed out to me by Wanda Gilbert Coker, we spare gas money, bus fare, time, and energy to travel here to speak to you? If you gain nothing else from this comment today, I want you to remember that you might restrict our public comments, but you cannot stop us from marching, from chalking, from making signs, or from talking and building community with each other. There is no limit to engagement that can occur within our communities, and I encourage every single person listening to this to build solidarity with each other, because come November, you must remember who spent more time listening to your issues, your council member or your neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you. So just a point of clarification, the deadline for public comment was 1 hour before today's meeting. And so that's one reason why you received notification when you did. Now, starting next week, so we can account for COVID, we are going to set the deadline for 5 o'clock on Monday, which will give us more time to prepare, but also more time to set the room to ensure that everybody is safe. So just a point of clarification. Next, we have Kristen Havlick.
Over the last month, Raleigh Police Department has continued to show how it upholds white supremacy and looks the other way when one of their officers...
Could we have your name and address, please?
Oh, sorry. Kristen Havlick, 11230 Avocet Lane. Over the last month, the Raleigh Police Department has continued to show how it upholds white supremacy and looks the other way when one of their officers abuses the system. In the last week, a Raleigh police officer was arrested after dealing drugs while on duty, carrying his firearm from his police car. The investigation wasn't even done by our own people. It was done by a U.S. Attorney's Office. The week prior, a Raleigh police officer took a knee to the neck of Maki Lucky, a customer at Wingstop who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time after Lucretia Godwin, an employee at Wingstop, got into an altercation with customers that did not include Mackay. And those customers called the Raleigh police. After they arrived, the officers quickly escalated the situation with the wrong people instead of using de-escalation tactics. So Lucretia started recording, and that made the officers angry. So the police officers assaulted Lucretia by pulling her hair and dragging her across the floor. Chief Patterson says that they are investigating the situation. But what happened to the officers? Are they on paid leave too, just like every other officer who has murdered and assaulted people of color? The violence does not end there. These are just 2 instances in the last month of police brutality and abusing the system. When will you start caring that the Raleigh Police Department is inherently racist and full of white supremacists? When are you going to stop upholding white supremacy?
Thank you. Next, we have Hua Huang.
Hua Huang, 7401 Ebenezer Church Road. I want to take this opportunity to talk about the current issue with the police. I will not name names so everyone on this council will take equal share of this responsibility. I remember being in a meeting with some of the council members almost 2 years ago, just after the local protest calling for justice for George Floyd. Knees on someone's neck, that you will break up more black communities by running a bus rapid transit and Dix Edge development, pricing out black families and subjecting them to homelessness. By the way, I heard that you're discussing homelessness today. Are you doing any sort of street outreach? Are you making any accommodations so that the homeless can actually speak for themselves without struggling to find a way to come here? If someone comes to Raleigh and hears about all of this, what grade do you think that would give Raleigh in terms of your effectiveness in addressing equity? Maybe it's time for another special meeting. Thank you.
Next, we have Cole McMullen.
Cole McMullen, 10530 Sablewood Drive, Raleigh 27617. At the beginning of every decade in America, a census is taken to update the official tally of citizens and their distribution throughout the country. This makes it necessary to redraw political maps and districts every 10 years, which provides an opportunity for bad actors to gerrymander districts for political gain. Even if those who are drawing the maps have the best of intentions, there are instances in which voters gerrymander themselves, as observed nationwide, with Democratic-leaning voters being concentrated in urban areas, while Republican-leaning voters typically reside in rural areas. Instead of adhering to a failing district system that is vulnerable to gerrymandering, the city of Raleigh should be a leader in proportional representation by second choice. Conversely, if no candidate receives a critical threshold of the vote, then the candidate with the least votes will be eliminated, and the voters who ranked the eliminated candidate first will have their vote transferred to their second choice. A single transferable vote format would ensure greater representation of minority communities that can achieve a critical threshold but cannot achieve a majority of the vote citywide. If Raleigh had a single transferable vote election format with no districts, it would have been unnecessary to redraw districts and subsequently delay the 2021 election. City Council should establish a study group to engage with the community about implementing a single transferable vote election format for multi-member seats and thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Allison Anthony.
Allison Anthony, 1719 Bennett Street. Continuing on the theme of community engagement, I'd like to bring up the events that the last Tuesday night public comment had. Some residents were bringing up shared concerns that a lot of the crowd that day agreed with, and as one does in life when they went to express support for a comment, a lot of the crowd clapped. The audacity, apparently. It takes time for the next speaker to get up to the podium, and from my recollection, this wasn't preventing speakers from talking. Mayor Baldwin, however, didn't see it this way and called for an end of the jeering. She also later threatened to have residents forcibly removed by the police present if they continued to clap. If I remember correctly, she told the audience, 3 strikes and you're out, as if the residents voicing their genuine frustrations of the politics that infect their entire lives were just petulant school children acting out that could be scolded away with baseball analogies. I visited the page for the rules of decorum and found that indeed, jeering isn't allowed. My apologies. Except is clapping jeering? Don't worry, I looked it up. Jeering, making rude or mocking remarks, especially in a loud voice. Turns out jeering has nothing to do with your hands. Jeering is also not something I would consider a display of support for a statement, quite the opposite. In conclusion, people were clapping for someone speaking against the council, and in return, the mayor retaliated and made a physical threat of force against people, weakly justifying it through the already strict rules of decorum. It was upsetting, but not surprising. Dear council, if there is clapping in the future, I invite you to pay attention to what your community has desperately been trying to tell you, instead of punishing and threatening them. Thank you.
Tim Niles? Is Mr. Niles here? Okay.
Tim Niles, 11509 Midlavian Drive. This was much more comfortable at home and in my pajamas. When this council defunded the CACs, you promised a new revolutionary engagement system. Last Friday's Planning Commission committee meeting was scheduled with only 48 hours notice and never placed on the city's events calendar. Revolutionary engagement. This weekend's council retreat is on the calendar, but indicates you may only watch it online. There's no notice that residents may actually attend. Revolutionary engagement. Immediately after a speaker told this council she only became fully engaged after virtual participation became possible, Councilor Stewart, apparently not having listened to what she just said, expressed her opinion that the same people engaged virtually that had engaged in person. There are no new participants, she said. Revolutionary engagement. Despite the precedent of Kerry's council providing virtual public comments during in-person meetings, even before the pandemic, our city attorney still insists allowing virtual public comment during in-person meetings is illegal in her opinion. Revolutionary engagement. Despite an opinion from the UNC School of Government stating hybrid meetings are legal, our city attorney still will not budge. Revolutionary engagement. COVID safety protocols are still in place. This chamber capacity is reduced by 2/3, yet you still refuse to allow virtual comments, further limiting public participation. Revolutionary engagement. You won't admit this council could allow virtual comments. You simply don't want to. Revolutionary engagement. It's been over 2 years now. Where's the revolution?
Next, we have Josh Bradley.
Joshua Bradley, 1324 Spring Lawn Court, Raleigh, North Carolina, 27609. I was going to finish, I got cut off last time because they reduced the time of the meeting, and I was going to read fully the comments that I did last time, but I found out that I won't have time to do it again, so bear with me. I'm speaking off the cuff. One thing that has concerned me recently after this past weekend where we had the Patriot Front people and Proud Boys downtown, one thing that was striking is how the police in the city differentiate how they treat white supremacists and fascists versus how they treat people that are protesting police violence. Whereas on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, when you had a small protest group protesting against the murder of the gentleman on the interstate, they were hit with an LRAD, which is awesome, using military equipment on kids that are fighting for social justice on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Weird, but at the same time, you had the Proud Boys here with their caravan and with Patriot Front people, and we know that Patriot Front people were there because they stickered up the whole area. And not only were they provided, places to use the restroom and guard fiercely, apparently, it's funny how they were not hit with an LRAD, or how when white supremacists frequently come out here and they tend to be protected by the police. I know, to be fair, a lot of them, know each other from the meetings, but I think it's unconscionable that we treat people that are fighting for social justice worse and as worse pariahs than we do actual white supremacists. Thank you very much and have a great day.
Next, we have Alex Stein. Alex Stein here. Okay, just so everybody knows, power is out downtown. You did see our power flash on and off, and we are not broadcasting right now. You apparently can hear us, but can't see us. So I just want everybody to be aware of that factor. Okay, next we have Shane Collins. Is Shane Collins here? Okay, next we have Jennifer Kochman.
Hi. I'm Jennifer Irving Kochman, 210 Woodburn Road. TC 1221 is about expanding commercial business into residentially zoned neighborhoods, and I don't think anyone has a problem with home businesses or ACUs within reason. But these tax changes leave the zoning so wide open that it could result in many unintended consequences. I've been able to follow this in the Tax Change Committee and Planning Commission, and while some changes have been made, it's still way too permissive, and it eliminates the city's regulation authority. The first big issue is equity and inclusion. The city's surveys on this issue were sent to a targeted 5 zip codes, which is not the correct way to build a representative sample of an entire city. Also, neighborhoods with homeowners associations will be completely protected from this commercial expansion. The neighborhoods who will be affected are the older neighborhoods downtown and underprivileged areas. The second big issue is that the sale of alcohol would be permitted in residential neighborhoods along with food retail. And the sale of tobacco and vaping products will be allowed at 25% of sales in neighborhoods with children, when our own Attorney General has made it his mission to discourage tobacco and vaping companies from marketing to children. The third issue is that this ordinance adds 7 new employees and customers per business, yet eliminates all parking requirements altogether, which will create mayhem for on-street public parking. It is important to remember that no matter how green we all want to be, there are still differently abled people in Raleigh who do not live downtown and cannot bike to work, and there are families who need cars to drive their children to school and activities and their senior parents to doctor appointments. Please consider your diverse constituents and their diverse lifestyles and ages when drafting ordinances that will affect all residents in Raleigh. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ms. Kochman, so you know, this has been sent to committee, the
Yes,
Economic
I do know.
Development.
Thank you so much. I just
Okay.
wanted to start the conversation and get it out there.
Okay.
I appreciate your time.
So feel free, that will be virtual this month, so if
Oh,
you would like
great.
to sign up, what's the date again?
It's the third Tuesday, 1:30, but I'll get staff to send you the link to sign up too, and we'll get it
Okay.
posted.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Regarding that issue, I was wondering if the committee will be looking into the sales of firearms. I was wondering if those will be prohibited.
We will be looking at all issues.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have Terry Snyder.
Good evening. My name is Terry Snyder, and I live at 1316 Westfield Avenue. I'm speaking to you tonight on behalf of Chantel Miles, who resides at 3408 Sioux Drive. She is unable to appear in person because of injuries from an accident that caused a broken elbow and broken wrist. Since attending city council meetings virtually is not currently an option for Raleigh residents, Chantel is unable to personally make her comments. Chantel would like to offer a rebuttal to the city attorney's opinion that it would somehow be unlawful for this council to allow the public to make comments virtually. She wants to make clear that the city attorney's opinion is just that, an opinion. The North Carolina General Assembly passed Section 166A-19.24 to establish clear standards on how local governments should conduct remote meetings during a pandemic. The purpose was not to temporarily make it legal for the public to make virtual comments. And while this council can't do less than what the law requires, it can do more. It is worth noting that the city attorney's interpretation of the law conveniently provides an excuse for this council to restrict public comments to those individuals who have the time, transportation, personal resources, and good health to appear before the council in person. This restriction is unacceptable, particularly given that several councilors have expressed, via both social and local media, a commitment to making civil engagement in Raleigh more equitable and therefore presumably accessible. Chantel encourages everyone on this council to make their position known as to whether they support allowing the public to make comments virtually or rather hide behind the city attorney's opinion. Thank you.
Please let Chantel know that we are all hoping that she is better soon. Thank you. Next, we have Alex Hayden, and incidentally, we are back up and running. You can hear us, see us, and hear us. Is the power back on downtown?
I don't know about the power downtown, but we are
it is.
broadcasting successfully.
Okay, thank you. Alex Hayden. Okay, I understand that Curtis Johnson is joined us. So, Mr. Johnson, if you would like to come up, give your name and address, please.
Good evening, Council. My name is Curtis Johnson. I reside at 1311 Bethel Road, Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm here up once again concerning the policies and procedures of the Raleigh Police Department being violated against me I've been here several times, but I don't know if it's clear what I'm asking and need from the City of Raleigh and the Council. But I would like it outlined that I am bringing one forward conversation stating obstruction of justice by the Raleigh Police Department, violating my civil rights as far as obstruction of justice. And I, as you all know, I came here several times and trespassed a young lady from my house. The officers, Hunter and Candelera, signed the trespass against her, and then 30 minutes later, she kicked my window in, came through my window. I called Raleigh Police Department back. Candelera and Hunter came back. They arrested me for assaulting her, protecting my house. They left my window out for 3 days because I had to stay in jail for 2 days and then made bond. But I want these things, everything that I'm speaking of, I want it outlined on a report to me from the City of Raleigh on the letterhead. The mayor, last time I appeared, said she thought and felt that it had been dealt with. No, not everything that the accusations, they're not accusations, they actually have merit. And I've never got that from the City of Raleigh, Internal Affairs, City Council, nobody. But I am in the position now, and I understand statute of limitation, but I've been able to talk to attorney Abe Jones, and he's willing to move forward with the lawsuit. And I don't understand why I can't get justice, and all those things were taken from my house. The Raleigh Police Department has said nothing about it or no concerns, and I have concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. We have responded to this, if I recall correctly, City Attorney? City Manager? Or would the City Attorney like to take this?
I think the city manager can answer this better than I can.
So I know that RPD has responded in some form or fashion over several years, Mr. Johnson, so not to put Major Boyce on the spot, but can you speak to that so that he doesn't have to keep coming every meeting to ask the same question?
Madam City Manager, I can speak with Mr. Johnson and give him the information that he needs, but it's been provided before, but we can give it to him again.
Okay, thank you, Major Boyce.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, that is the end of public comment. We will now go to matters scheduled for public hearing. The first issue is the City Council Redistricting 2020 Census. Before we begin, I guess Mr. Bowers will be here to present on behalf of staff. Could you raise your hand if you're here to speak on this issue? All right, could you come to the front so we can, all of you over there are fine where you are. Just the people in the back, if they could come to the front.
So, good evening, Mayor and Council. Ken Bowers from Planning and Development. Here to present on the matter of redistricting, and I'm going to give a brief presentation to give some background on the need for and legal framework for redistricting, talks about the process, and then presents the map that you have authorized to be heard tonight at public hearing. So we start, this is in the state general statutes. If you have districts in your city and you have new census data from the decennial census, which is the full count of the population, and you have to do a redistricting if you find that your population is out of balance. So what does it mean to be out of balance? Well, in the city of Raleigh, our charter calls for 5 council districts. We have the mayor, 2 at large, and 5 district council members. And so the target population is that total population within the city limits divided by 5. And then since perfection of population is not achievable, case law tells us that the target is to be plus or minus 5%. So if you're out of 5% deviation from that target population, then you must redistrict, which is what we're here to talk about tonight. So, as I think many people are aware, due to a number of factors, the census data arrived to us much later than normal. It would normally be to us in April, and it came last September at the end of the month. And when we looked at the data, we found out that redistricting was necessary. District A was out of balance by minus 10%. And District B, while within the 5% threshold, was just barely within it. It was above the target by 4.7%. So council gave a charge to staff to prepare 3 different maps that would balance the population, so 3 alternatives. And there were 6 criteria for do that. The equal population we've talked about. Contiguity means that there's no islands, that the districts, all parts of the district touch each other. Compactness is sort of a standard that the boundaries should look logical, and there shouldn't be long tendrils or spiky boundaries or other things. We should have logical looking boundaries. Preserve communities of interest. It's a very broad goal, and there's many different ways to define communities of interest. We looked at it largely from the standpoint of geography, so places that have a shared interest. Neighborhoods around, say, North Carolina State University are all impacted by the presence of the university. They have a shared interest. They've traditionally been in District D, as an example of that. Avoid pairing incumbents, so was last one, and then the last criteria was to provide some consideration of future growth. And this is based on the fact that some of the districts don't have a lot of future annexation area, but others do, specifically Districts B and C, where the city has lots of land, and the county that might be annexed into the city someday is mostly in the northeast and southeast areas, and that's District B and District C. Currently, District C has almost all of that future annexation area. A more minor portion of it is in District B. The proposed alternative corrects that. So to draw the districts, we start with the city limits. If you're not in the city limits, you're not a voter. So we only look at the population within the city limits. Overlaying that is the voting precincts. For ease of election administration, the voting precincts are the boundaries, and then we look at the population at the intersection of those 2 things. You wanted an independent review of this. You had the study group that had looked at council terms and compensation and voter engagement, and you reactivated them and referred the 3 alternatives to them. and you ask them to obtain public input, including from organizations that have particular expertise or interest in the redistricting process, and to provide you with a list of pros and cons, and to complete the work by January 31st, which they did. That was delivered to you at your first meeting in February, on February 1st. It was I think, a very thorough report. It included all of the input that we received in both its raw form as well as a condensed summary. The outreach methods we used to get public input, we sent a lot of emails out. So we have 9,000 subscribers on GovDelivery. They all got emails about the listening sessions, and I'll get to those. There were social media platforms. We had over 40,000 impressions on those and 978 engagements, which is people who either commented on or shared the post. And then there was a web page that was put up to provide information, included an interactive viewer where folks could zoom in on the maps and see which district they would be in under the different proposals. We got almost 1,300 page views related to those pages, and 238 views of the interactive map viewer. The study group held 2 meetings in December to get input, and they heard from 5 groups: NC Counts Coalition, League of Women Voters, North Carolina Asian Americans Together, El Pueblo, and the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. Many of these groups had done their own independent analysis using the website Days Redistricting. Other redistricting proposals, their numbers were in, I believe, perfect agreement with the data that staff had put together for the redistricting process, and they made many comments on it, and had many observations, but uncovered no significant flaws in the districts as proposed. The listening sessions were held. There were 4 of them. They included discussion of both the recommendations on council terms and compensation, as well as the redistricting. 3 of them were in person. There was Chavis Community Center, Laurel Hills Community Center. We added one on December 15th for the Green Road Community Center. That's in a precinct that is impacted by the redistricting. And that was a recommendation of some of the interest groups, including the Counts Coalition, that we add a meeting in that location, so we did. And then there was one that was originally scheduled for Abbott's Creek, but at this time the Omicron wave was gathering steam, and so the decision was made to hold that meeting remotely. It actually had the highest number of participants. We also had an email inbox where people could email the study group, and we received just over 200 emails on the topic of the redistricting. So that's a recap of the process. At the end of that group, the study group delivered their report, looked at the pros and cons, and council identified scenario 2 as their preferred redistricting alternative. This redistricting alternative does achieve balance across the districts. The most out of balance is District D, which is down by 2.2%. Everyone else is at 2% deviation or lower. So this meets that target. Just sort of briefly describing some of the major changes here. Areas between, roughly between Atlantic Avenue and Capitol Boulevard, south of Millbrook Road and north of 440, would move from District B to District A. District B would take over areas that were between 540 and Durant Road on the west side of Capitol Boulevard. One change that was made to balance the future annexation areas, so that northeastern annexation areas would go into District B and southeastern ones would go into District C, was to swap some precincts on the east side of Capitol Boulevard and between Capitol and New Bern Avenue, between B and C. There are some other minor changes there, but those are the major ones. And this map kind of shows side by side the existing districts are on the left, and the proposed districts in scenario 2 are there on the right. Why was scenario 2 chosen? Based on the pros and cons list that was developed by the study group, it was the one with the best balance. It had the smallest deviations across the districts. The boundaries better followed major transportation corridors, so they seem very logical boundaries. The future annexation areas, as I mentioned, were more evenly divided between districts B and C. The diversity of the existing districts is largely maintained. Districts B and C are majority-minority today. They remain so under this proposal. District C is majority black today. It remains so under this proposal. District B is under the target population by 0.8%. A lot of growth activity, as I think the council is well aware, is occurring in the Northeast, and so it has room to grow through future annexation. That concludes my overview of the redistricting. I'd be
Okay,
happy
thank
to
you.
take any questions from
Any
the council.
questions? Councilmember Cox?
Yes, and I've brought this up in the past, and I'm going to bring it up again. If you look at the scenario 2, we end up moving about 55,000 people, which is about 12% of the Raleigh's population. And when you look at that that population that's being moved as part of scenario 2, the majority, nearly 60%, are non-white. Now, I have in front of me the website of the National Conference of State Legislatures, and it says, in addition to population equality, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 prohibits plans that intentionally or inadvertently discriminate on the basis of race, which could dilute the minority vote. So even though District B is still predominantly, has a minority population, that minority population, District B, is being diluted as a result of scenario 2. And it also begs the question of how in a city that is majority white do we end up with a plan that moves a majority of non-white citizens?
I think the largely is those swaps of the precincts that are between Capitol Boulevard and New Bern. So it's taking precincts that are largely minority and moving them between B and C. That probably is resulting in that result. And then, of course, the impetus for that was because District C has such a large amount of the future annexation area.
Thank you. All right, can I have a show of hands again who is here to speak on this? Okay, hold hands up, please, so I can. So normally we would do 8 minutes per side in a hearing, but there are, I think, 9 of you. So I'm going to ask to give each of you a minute to speak. Is anybody here to speak in favor? Okay. What I would like you to do is if you could line up along the side there and then come up one at a time. Can we have staff assist? Okay, if we could set the timer, 1 minute, name and address, please, for the record.
Kristen Havlick, as it currently stands, the redistricting options from the city of Raleigh makes for a poor example of true equity. None of the 3 options currently being considered by the council is sufficient to adequately represent all residents in Raleigh. The fact that the city group can only consider options created by staff with no analysis of existing inequities in the city's district before the ball gets rolling is concerning. The 3 scenarios were drawn by the staff without guidance from the public. We were only given the opportunity to see the maps after they were drawn, not during the process. And so this was addressed when the study group met with the city to review the comments they have gathered from the public at that meeting. Although the study group could not be allowed to change the 3 scenarios in any way or create a new scenario, the study group could have asked the staff to create a new scenario, such as moving a white precinct to a black district instead, but they did not. This also speaks to a larger issue, the study group not suggesting an alternative map based on the entirety of public comments.
Name and address for the record, please.
Angelina Echeverria, 3304 Barker Place. I've lived in the Brentwood area of Raleigh for the last 10 years and been active in the Latino community. I'd like you to keep my community of immigrant families together in District B. My community is very heavily immigrant, like myself, a lot of children of immigrants. The Green Road Community Centers, where I take Zumba and I vote early. All the businesses on Capitol Boulevard and New Hope Church are the businesses of my community, where you can see the different countries that folks come from, Latin America, the Caribbean, Asia, Africa. We deserve to be part of a district that takes into consideration the common experiences of migration, language barriers, and the racial and ethnic discrimination that unites us with established Black communities in our area. I'm not really familiar with District A. I don't know a lot about it. I don't think it reflects my neighborhood. A lot of the growth in Raleigh is due to the growth of the Asian and the Hispanic community. Precincts that are majority minority should not be forced to move to districts where our needs are less likely to be taken into account. I identify
Thank
with
you.
District B.
Byron Laws, Quarry Street, lifelong resident of the City of Oaks. Tonight, I'm offering comments as a training capacity building manager of NC Counts Coalition, a nonpartisan, nonprofit 501c3 organization committed to building a health and just, equitable North Carolina through cross-sector partnership that advances systemic solutions for communities facing systemic barriers. Our organization serves as a facilitator, a cross-sector partnership, coordination for a complete, accurate 2020 census count, as well as during the state and local redistricting process. A fair and transparent redistricting process should include opportunities to educate the public on the maps and the process that include details on how public comments will be incorporated into the map drawing process. We provided comments to the study group in order to provide you all with information on what our communities need, and some of those were ignored. While we celebrated best practices in regards to creating an additional listening session, many people did not feel welcomed.
Thank you.
This
Your
matter is important
time-
when it comes to fair maps, and the fact
Your
that
time,
you have this
sir.
many people here, and
Your
they're only
time
allowed
is
to
up.
speak for 1 minute. That's the
Get
issue
rid of
with
the
what's
microphone.
happening here. I'm representing a group that you all actually reached out to, and I'm not trying to take up too much time, but you all asked us to speak on this matter, and that's why I'm here, because we did the work. We studied, we looked at the data to try to provide you all with best practices for
Your
a better
time
map.
is up.
This is the issue.
Next.
Joshua Riley, 1324 Spring Lawn Court. On balancing the numbers. The city needs to take a nuanced analysis of the racial data unique to the city of Raleigh, understanding how it's going to be split and how it is going to be moved, and look at the totality of the situation. The study group put together by Raleigh is only being tasked to balance the population, but redistricting is more than just balancing a number. You do not want to move communities such that you'd be splitting up neighborhoods that share a school or a church. If number is the only thing you care about, would it not make sense to go scenario one, where you'd be only moving 77, 60 people instead of 55, 419, which is what scenario two would do. It should also be noted that on survey of council terms of compensation, 76% agreed that the city council should increase the size to 9 by adding 1 district seat, while 67% disagreed with adding an at-large seat. Currently, the community has raised the need for additional single-member district. If the city does not take this matter seriously, then scenario one is a viable alternative.
Next.
Cole McMullen, 10530 Sablewood Drive, Raleigh 27617. Problem with the study group: the city government did the residents of Raleigh a disservice by not adequately vetting the people involved in this study group to make sure they understand what should be involved in an analysis of redistricting when there's a need to also address equity and racial justice. Instead of taking this opportunity to bring the public, especially people from the impacted Black and Brown communities, to be a part of this study group for the redistricting process, the city brought in, as I understand it, a sitting politician, a previous city councilor, 3 past city council candidates, 2 land use attorneys, a past CEO of the Chamber of Commerce. Some of these members are large dollar donors to the campaigns of the current city councilors. There are over 460,000 people in Raleigh. How is it possible that the city government could only find the same people in the same circle of power and status to be involved in this study group? Thank you.
Haley Kinsler, 804 Gorman Street, Apartment C. Summarizing community engagement responses at these meetings and saying that no one found the scenarios objectionable is inaccurate, and I know it because I attended 3 of them. When we raised our concerns and questions, we received evasive responses that did not address these issues. The study group failed to provide an explanation of their proposed maps that is accessible to the average resident of Raleigh, meaning that community members cannot make a truly informed opinion about the redistricting. And I know that to be true because nobody mentioned that this was going to impact a majority-minority district in B, other than the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. That wasn't somebody with the city of Raleigh. To add to the confusion, the meetings hosted by the Public Engagement Office talked about both the redistricting and the council term lengths and compensation in the same meeting. Finally, when the city discussed the public comment, they were dismissive of the 200-plus comments just because they are, as the city said, form letters. Does the city only consider a comment valid if the comment agrees with their opinion? Thank you.
Sebastian Fernandez Geraldo, 2128 Balboa Road. On the need for racially polarized voting analysis that takes into context the totality of the situation. Redistricting is more than just moving people around to get equalized districts. If the city does not take this opportunity to make the districts of Raleigh more equitable, but instead makes it less so by making black votes even more powerless, this city is directly harming the ability of our city government to accurately represent our community. The city should have performed an analysis based on racially polarized voting, which is a mathematical analysis to see if communities of color, namely black voters, support a specific one candidate and whether white voters' decision can suppress the choice by the voters of color in any area. Districts should be drawn specifically to protect the voting power of the voters of color, especially black voters in this area. Racially polarized voting analysis is part of the Voter Rights Act and should be something that the city implements into their redistricting process to ensure legal, fair maps. Also, why are you having 1 minute per person when there's nobody to speak in favor of this?
Because we normally have 8 minutes per side, so we're relaxing the rules. Thank you. Name and address, please.
Jeremy Gilchrist, 710 Sasser Street. Has the city heard of prison gerrymandering? It's where incarcerated people are counted and districted where they're detained rather than where their real homes are located. Just last month, February 9th, Spectrum News reported that Granville County has a major issue with this, given that it is home to Butner Federal Correctional Institution. This can lead to severe inequity with growing prison population in the country. Furthermore, many incarcerated people cannot vote or do not have access to vote, even if they make up a big part of the district's population. So this means those who aren't incarcerated in that district would have more voting power than a neighboring district because of the added numbers. In Raleigh, not counting the juvenile detention center, there are 10 prisons and correctional institutions. Has the city and its study group looked into the number of incarcerated people in Raleigh that may have skewed the number? Thank you.
Huang, 7401 Ebenezer Church Road. So we know that what's happening in Raleigh is happening across the cities in North Carolina, such as Charlotte, which is now moving Hidden Valley from District 4 to District 1 and making them part of uptown Charlotte, where not only the voting power of black voters will be diluted, black candidates will also have a harder time winning elections in the district that are being moved to. In short, we know this is a case of the white supremacy power using the same handbook to suppress black voting power in the community. It's the same game all the time, different places. And with all three given scenarios by the city of Raleigh, moving at least one majority minority precinct into whiter area, you can claim that your decision is racially neutral. In fact, doing things while claiming to be racially colorblind is extremely counterproductive. And the city has had time to create a map that doesn't diminish black political power and reflect the diverse community living in Raleigh rather than splitting them apart. So until the city had demonstrated they had done so, none of the map scenarios should be considered equitable change to our city and communities.
Bob, your time is up. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dondre Yates. I live at 2107 Black Wolf Run Lane, right here in Raleigh. I was born and raised in Raleigh. Right now, I feel less important than I did years ago as far as voting power. And I mean, y'all know these things ain't fair. These maps are not fair. Y'all pushing us farther and farther, so-called black and brown communities, farther and farther out. And we want to be inclusive. We want to know what's going on. We want to be a part of the Raleigh. And I think everybody has a fair chance at life. And just don't keep pushing us out. You know, we want to be a part of the conversations. That's all I have.
My name is Maria Gonzalez, 6025 Shade Tree Lane, Apartment B. I work with El Pueblo, a nonprofit organization that has been working with the Latinx community for over 25 years. We've made an effort to be part of the city of Raleigh's redistricting process, and in some areas, the city has done a better job than the state to facilitate our participation. The listening sessions, however, were not what we expected. On the website and in communication with us, these listening sessions were going to be about the redistricting process. We prepared our community members to speak, helped them find their districts and prepare their comments, and coordinated transportation to be at the sessions. We arrived and were immediately confused. The session was not focused on redistricting. In fact, redistricting took maybe 10 minutes of the session's time, and they never opened the floor to hear from the people present. To try to make ourselves heard, we tried introducing ourselves to the people running the meeting, asking to speak, and even trying to speak one-on-one after the session, but were brushed off each time. This was a chance for our community leaders to speak out on an issue that directly impacts their life, and they were outright ignored. And although there was Spanish language interpretation available, it was a second thought and poorly explained, so that by the time our leaders were connected, they'd missed the beginning of the meeting. Our leaders had arrived at that meeting ready to speak despite being full-time mothers and workers, and they had prepared to speak.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Wanda Hunter, Maple Street. That's just rude to not listen to the testimony of the people's lives that is going to be impacted. Those are diverse people, black and brown folks who are going to be impacted by this, who are going to be the ones that you're going to be looking for to vote for your tail in November. It's rude because that's going to affect their everyday lives. What y'all need to be talking about is the racial polarized voting analysis, which is part of the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, which is some legality that Robin need to look into. Y'all need to look at the nuanced analysis. Y'all need to show us that information behind these 3 options that you put forth. You need to stop letting your staff come up here and lie. Ken Bauer stood up here and lied, said that these 5 groups, El Pueblo, North Carolina Asian Americans Together, NC Counts, Social Coalition for Social Justice, and the League of Women Voters, did not say anything against these maps, and indeed they did. We just held a meeting on Tuesday for all these people to come down here and talk about this. They did not accept any of these maps. All of them are gerrymandered. The last thing I'm gonna say is,
Hunter, your time is
racism
up.
drives gerrymandering. Maps and fusion movements defeat them.
Hunter, your
We
time
stand
is
in
up.
solidarity to defeat your gerrymandered maps. And all the people that are here in opposition of the maps that the city of Raleigh has put forward, please stand. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor? Okay, I'm going to close the hearing. I'm going to close the hearing. You took some of their 8 minutes, so thank you. We are going to bring this back to the table. Does anybody have any questions, comments?
I do. For the city attorney, is Raleigh covered by the Voting Rights Act, Section 2?
It is not.
And could you share with the council and the people here some details about how the council has handled redistricting in the past and contrast it with the process that was used to bring us here today?
I can tell you what I have been told because I wasn't here. Mr. Bowers, is he still here somewhere? Yes. And he can elaborate on this if I'm incorrect. My understanding is he was involved in the last 2010 census data redistricting, and that it was done, I think, pretty much totally out of the public eye, and that the city attorney brought the districts to the council during the report of the city attorney, and that there was not any public engagement at that time. Is that correct, Ken?
Ma'am, that is the truth, okay? And please don't insult our staff. Please do not insult our staff. Please do not insult our staff. Ma'am, would you like it if people stood here and called you a liar? No. No, you would not. No, you would not. So please be respectful, and thank you. No, that's not being respectful. That is not being respectful, and we are going to bring it back to the table. Did you have additional questions?
I do, and I think I need Mr. Bauer's help for this. It's a data-related question. So the question is, we know under our current map, the existing map today, District B is a minority-majority district. Under the scenario 2 that's in front of us, the proposed map, is District B still a minority-majority district?
Yes, it is.
So one more follow-up on that point. So, Mr. Bowers, you study the process. You're familiar with the terms. Do you know the term packing?
I'll be honest. My role here was technical, and it was to work with staff to develop some alternatives that balanced it. So, I believe yes, packing refers to the process of putting people from a certain group, concentrating them in a single district. But
Reducing their
I'm
voice.
would not consider myself a expert on the more political aspects of redistricting.
Okay, fair enough. And a comment, if I may, Mayor. So I think the process that's brought us to this point is a vast improvement of over what we've done in the past as a city. It's been transparent. It's involved public comment. It's been an unprecedented level of transparency into the redistricting process that used to be handled behind closed doors, without public input, with districts drawn by politicians. And on the question of District B, the effect of putting too many minority voters in District B, driving up the percentage of minority voters in that district, is to dilute their influence across the entire city. And that's just as wrong as breaking up minority communities. This is a good map. It's a good process. The civil rights groups that have participated in this have communicated directly with the members of council. I hosted a town hall to set that process up. We did as close to what I would say they described as the gold standard. These maps were drawn publicly, without influence from the politicians who have to run in these districts. And I'm proud of the work we've done. I'm proud of the result, and I look forward to voting in favor of these maps.
Could I address one thing about the comments we got from the 5 groups across the study group meetings, and the perception that I somehow misrepresented that? First of all, I would note that you've received a complete report, including all of their presentations and all of the data they presented, unexpurgated and unedited, in your backup on February 1st. So there was no hiding any information from the council before you made this decision. The second thing I would like to note is that the very same points that were brought up at this meeting were brought up by those groups. The demographics of the precincts moved were noted. That data was presented and it was received by the study group. It was up to the study group to make a determination. But the groups, in presenting this information, noted them. They did not consider at the time it to be a objectionable change in the racial demographics of the districts. In fact, the Coalition for Social Justice even included a bullet point in their presentation saying that there was not a significant impact. So that was the basis of my conclusion. It's unfortunate that some people feel that I have misrepresented what they said, but the full text of their information was presented to you as part of your backup. And I believe we have, at least at the staff level, have tried to be extremely transparent about the process and the information, and also have tried to be very welcoming at the public meetings that we held. And I worked with our colleagues to hopefully try to be as open and honest about the process, about the how the maps were created, what was in them, and we answered a lot of questions across all of those meetings. So it was our goal to try to provide as much thorough information as we could.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers. Appreciate that. Councilmember Cox?
I have to disagree with Councilmember Buffkin. First of all, even though District B remains minority majority, that minority population gets reduced to just a little over 50%, whereas before we were well over, approaching 60% in District B. So when you start diluting the minority population, you reduce their chances of being able to elect a minority representative to this council. There is a term that Mr. Buffkin referred to known as packing. There is another term that's also used in the concept of gerrymandering, which is called cracking, which is to dilute a minority vote, and you can spread minorities across all the districts such that every district is majority white or very close to being majority white. And what you're doing to District B is reducing it so that it's about 50% white and 50% minority. And whereas right now, we're seeing a gradual migration of District B to becoming definitely majority minority. And I think it's a shame that even if the 1965 Voting Rights Act doesn't directly apply to the city, that we don't follow the guidance of the 1965 Voting Rights Act in order to ensure that we're being racially equitable in the city of Raleigh.
Thank you. First off, I'm going to close the hearing and want to ask if anybody else has any questions or comments. I do have one question, the city attorney, if I may. We've referred to the Southern Coalition for Social Justice a couple of times, but what was it that they said? Do we know? I mean, do we have that information available that you can share with us?
Yes, I actually happen to have the slide in front of me that they presented to the study group. I will say that that group is represents a plaintiff in the state litigation that has challenged the state districts that has been in the courts for months and it's now at the U.S. Supreme Court. And one of the allegations that that group makes about the state maps is that it dilutes the vote of minorities. When they appeared in front of the study group, their statement was that the majority minority districts B and C are maintained. There are some slight differences, but it will not have a substantial impact. It just reflects the changes and shifts in the population. So that was what they presented to this study group at the time.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other comments?
I just have one question. And it's kind of for Ken. And if we were to do nothing and use maps 1, option 1, how imbalanced would the districts, I mean, I know the presentation, but on projected growth, how imbalanced would they be? Because I know there's that, one vote, one voice that we have to also hear about.
Do you want me to look up precise enough? If you give me a second, I can look up precise numbers, but I can tell you that alternative 1, the balance was pretty good, just not quite as good as alternative 2. So it certainly met the 5% rule easily. If you want a precise number on that, I can get it for you.
Good.
Do you want a precise number,
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Branch?
So, a second, that's the wrong. In the alternative, in scenario 1, which moved 2 precincts, but one of those precincts was a tiny number of households located near the water treatment plant. District B is down by 2.7%, so it's a little bit higher than the largest variance for District 2, which is 2.2%. District A is down by 1.6%. District C is up by 1.5%. D is up by 1.1%, and District E is up by 1.5%.
Okay.
Councilmember Cox?
It's also true that scenario 1 minimizes the dilution of the minority vote in District B to like about, reduces it maybe 1% compared to scenario 2. So scenario 1 would be a far better option in terms of the dilution of the minority vote, Plus, it only moves about 7,000 people compared to having to move 55,000 people in the city, especially at a time when we're thinking about adding a district at some point in the future.
Okay, any other comments? Councilmember Knight?
Madam Mayor, I'm ready to make a motion whenever.
Okay, please.
Is it before us, or do I just say I move to, for the city council to approve the recommendation that we put forward before to accept proposal number 2?
That's correct. That's correct. And the resolution and the maps are in the backup, so it would be a motion to approve those.
As well. Thank you.
Okay, do we have a second?
Substitute motion, please. I'd like to make a substitute motion that we adopt scenario 1.
Hearing no second, the motion fails. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please raise your hands.
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, so that passes with Councilmember Cox in opposition. Okay, thank you. Next, we have street closing STC 08-2021, portions of West Lenoir Street and West South Street. I'm going to let the group leave, and then I have a question before we start. Before we start. I'm going to ask before we begin if anybody is here to speak on this issue, either for or against. Are you here to?
I'm just here to answer questions.
Oh,
On behalf of the applicant.
okay. So I've been asked by staff and the applicant to reschedule the public hearing to March 15th, unless anyone was here present to speak. So what I'm going to ask is that I'm going to make a motion to move this to March 15th, and I'm asking for a second.
Second.
Councilmember Melton is seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Councilmember Cox?
Aye.
Okay. So this will be moved to the March 15th meeting. Okay, thank you. Okay, next we have street closing, STC 12-2021, portions of Mid Lakes Drive and Holly Lane. And before we begin, I'm going to ask if anybody's here to speak in favor or in opposition. Anybody here to speak, raise your hand. Okay, no one is here to speak. All right.
Okay. Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. Ann Conlon in Transportation. This street closure is for 2 segments of right-of-way. You can see on the map a strip of right-of-way along Mid Lakes Drive and a portion of Holly Lane. The request is to support a subdivision, the Altair subdivision, which has been provisionally approved pending this closure. The portion of Mid Lakes Drive will allow a realignment of that street, and the other closure will allow a different street grid as part of the development. The dedication of new right-of-way is required to be done on the same plat as the closure to ensure that appropriate right-of-way is maintained, and staff has identified a sanitary sewer easement that also is recommended to be retained. So we found this closure to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. You can see here the conditions for street closure in the comprehensive plan. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions of staff? Okay, I'm going to open the hearing and close the hearing. Do we have a motion?
Move for approval.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that was unanimous, clerk. Okay, next we have rezoning Z6820 Hillsborough Street and Bagwell Avenue.
Good evening, Madam Mayor. It's great to see you. Bynum Walter, Raleigh Planning and Development. It's great to be with all of you tonight.
I'm used to seeing you on a little screen, and usually this isn't working, so it's all good.
Yeah, this is really cool. Our first rezoning public hearing this evening is a continuation from earlier meetings. This is Z6820. Again, the applicant is asking for this public hearing to be continued so that they can continue to revise conditions. They're asking for continuation to the next meeting on the 15th. And I actually haven't seen the applicant, but I assume they are present if you have questions for them.
Well, I know there's some folks from the community here, but Madam Mayor, we would be in favor of moving it to April 1st. I think they've got one remaining condition to work out, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I think we need to move it to the 15th, so then we can set the public hearing for the 1st.
Right.
Okay.
So we will continue this and then set the public hearing for the 1st. So we need a motion. Okay.
That's my motion.
Second.
Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so this will be set for the 15th. Thank you. And then they need to get conditions in by Friday.
By Friday, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have rezoning Z4121 Bloodworth Street at the southwest corner of the intersection of South Bloodworth Street and East Cabarrus Street.
Yes, ma'am. This is a rezoning request for a number of lots that total just under 2 acres. And the request here is changing the frontage and removing the historic overlay district, as there's a general historic overlay district here in this area, and they are asking to remove that. So this request is inconsistent with the 2030 comprehensive plan. The Planning Commission recommends denial by a split vote, and the Raleigh Historic Development Commission also recommends denial, and the State Historic Preservation Office concurs with the Historic Development Commission's recommendation. So this is an aerial view of the site, so you can see we're east of downtown on the west side of Bloodworth here, just north of Shaw's northernmost holdings. You can see the site outlined here. This is in the Prince Hall Historic Overlay District, and on the eastern boundary of that. They are proposing one condition here, which would prohibit a handful of uses, a couple of views of the site, the structures on the site. And the change here is a significant increase in commercial entitlement. It would also increase the allowed housing density, as well as the retail entitlement. My understanding is the request here, the purpose of this is to allow expansion of an existing daycare use. So it is consistent with some of the policy in the comprehensive plan, but inconsistent with, in particular, our frontage policies and policies about historic neighborhood protection and preservation. And more, basically inconsistent with all the historic preservation policies in the plan that we use to evaluate rezonings, as well as small area policies from the South Park small area plan. Again, Planning Commission recommends denial, RHDC recommends denial, and the State Historic Preservation Office concurs with the Historic Development Commission's recommendation as well. What questions could I answer for you before you open the hearing?
Any questions? Councilmember Brown.
Thank you for the presentation. Actually, I'm going to ask the question, but you can actually give me the answer after we have the hearing. My question is, when was the overlay put on, and what was the vote of how the council may have voted at that time, if you have it?
Okay. I know we have preservation staff in the chamber tonight, so I'm going to go talk to them.
Thank you.
Okay. So I would like a show of hands. Who is here in favor, speaking in favor of this project?
I think they're all speaking.
Okay. We're going to do, all right, and is anybody here speaking in opposition? Okay, I see one hand. So it will be 8 minutes per side. I'm going to open the hearing, and we will start with the applicant.
Good evening, Mac Paul here on behalf of the applicant, Beginning and Beyond Child Care Center. We have with us Bobby Sanders and Rosalind Blair, who operate the Child Care Center. And just as a preliminary matter, we're not seeking to rezone the base district, which is DX, or the height. As you heard, we're seeking to remove the overlay district in order to facilitate an expansion of a preschool that has existed there for many, many years, to include a gymnasium and programs for older kids. I just want to note, this is about this district, the overlay district. The special character statement for that district says it is distinct because it is home to Shaw University, which attracted students to Raleigh, and many settled in this neighborhood as a place to make their way in the city. Rosalind Blair and Bobby Sanders embody this character statement in many ways, having both come to Raleigh to go to Shaw University and settling in this neighborhood to pursue their vision. Here's a look from their facility into the downtown. You can see how close it is to the central part of Raleigh. This shows you some of the old sandboard maps of the district, and you can see many of the buildings that were there at one time. Many of them are gone, which has created one of the problems that we're facing as they're seeking to pursue their community center. This is actually one of the last non-residential buildings left in the district. With the assistance of New City Design Group, we have Ted Van Dyke here with us. Beginning and Beyond did pursue a certificate of appropriateness pursuant to the overlay district and had trouble because you have to show compatibility with this existing structures, and there are very, very few non-residential structures. We're not here to say that without enough money and time they could never achieve the certificate of appropriateness. We're asking for you to grant them relief from having to go through the requirement of the certificate of appropriateness. Given the fact they're long-term residents, they did not support the overlay district and long predated it when it was put in place, and their track record of providing a critical service to East Raleigh. I'll only note that the rezoning is consistent with the central business, the future land use map of CBD, the urban form map, and the downtown element with 3 stories, and it meets a number of policies, including targeted economic development in East Raleigh. We respectfully ask for your support, and with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Blair.
Good evening. My name is Rosalind Blair Sanders.
And I'm Bobby Sanders. We reside at 524 Sherbrooke Drive, 27610.
We are the co-founders and owners of Beginning and Beyond Child Development Center, where children are learning for life. Is it indeed a pleasure to be here today? Because we do have a story to tell. The story is that we were here. When I say we were here, we purchased our property over 25 years ago. We've been up and running for 22 years, serving children from 6 weeks to 12 years of age. They do not want to leave us. So what we're looking to do is to expand our program, and in expanding it, we're going to add children aged 13 to 18 to add life skills training. With Shaw University being there and other universities, we have been able to have an opportunity to collaborate. We call it communiversity, the community and the university working together. We were able to help Shaw found their daycare, and we gave them the handbook. And how could 2 daycares exist side by side? Because we worked together in the president's office trying to see how we could coexist. We decided to work with the traditional daycare, and Shaw University decided to work with children with special needs, and they program with Wade County Public School. What we're asking today is to respectfully be removed from this overlay district because of the fact that I consider myself a trench dweller, meaning that we work with children, we're there, and we work with children with a 90% poverty level. We went into the homeless shelters to start our daycare center, and we work with children from 7 in the morning to 11 at night to get this daycare up and running. And what we really want to do is to be able to really tune in on what we have to do for our little people to become great citizens of the city of Raleigh. And I believe that is very important, but we need your support.
I'm a native North Carolinian, born and raised in Clayton, North Carolina. And I can tell you the ins and outs and the history of everything from Bloodworth to Davie to Cabarrus. The picture that was shown earlier about the Governor Moorhead School, I played basketball against those guys. The length of Bloodworth Street used to be 100% black. Where Shaw Daycare is now, used to be an apartment complex and a grocery store. You go up to the next corner where they planted this, put the new house, there used to be a liquor store. Across the street from there was Cottingham, a grocery store. See, my whole premises is that I knew what I was gonna be in the 6th grade. I knew I was gonna coach. And I developed a philosophy, give every child a chance. But that's not happening with the kids in Southeast Raleigh now.
In closing, I would like for everyone that supports us to please stand. We wanted to let you know that we have been good stewards of the land of Raleigh. We have been awarded the Sir Walter Raleigh Awards. We have been awarded the Environmental Award twice and CAC Community Award. We're just asking the opportunity to be here today, and we're standing for our children. Thank you very much.
Okay, there's one minute left. Would you like to reserve that time? Matt, would you like to reserve the minute?
Yes. Can we do 30 seconds and we'll just...
Okay.
Marquette Hester, 323 East Cabarrus Street. And my family has lived on Cabarrus Street for 77 years. I have been a homeowner for 25 years. I currently have a child that attends Beginning and Beyond Child Care. And so I am in support of the growth that is there. I'm very appreciative to Beginning and Beyond for what they have done, what they would like to do, and I am just in favor, and I'm hoping that you will as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, do we have, I think I saw one person with their hand raised, wanted to speak in opposition. Can you come up and give your name and address, please?
Good evening. My name is Jenny Harper. I live at 312 East Cabarrus Street. Have been there for the past 16 plus years with my family. I concede that following the daycare is a tough act. They are a wonderful facility. They have been an integral part of our lived experience in this community all these years. And it's a resource that we have both appreciated greatly, and we have derived a lot of enjoyment over many years, especially the last couple of years, to hear children out having a great time, living life carefree. We would love nothing more for the daycare to continue operating as it's been able to do for a very long while, very, very far into the future. It is not anything to do with the daycare itself. But there is nothing within the application that's before you that offers any conditions that codifies that this will indeed be the case. And as we've learned time and time again the last couple of years, life can change very quickly in unexpected ways. I come here tonight to ask you to consider denying this rezoning, not because the proposed use is not worthwhile, it absolutely is, but because not only is there nothing that prevents the daycare from continuing to operate as it stands with the HOD intact, but there's also nothing on a substantial 1.69 acre collective parcel valued at $4 million that prevents the applicant from constructing a new facility with the historic overlay district in place. The city is only able to implement a 365 delay as a tool to prevent demolition itself, but it would be so meaningful on this large parcel,
parcel of this size, to incorporate these 5 contributing historic resources into a new cutting-edge center, much like Explorus, now Marbles, did in the late 90s with the adjacent historic buildings that contribute so much today to the Moore Square Historic Overlay District. Many of the subject parcels have actually been acquired since the district was designated, and it's difficult to imagine that with 5 contributing historic resources on them and this neighborhood's deep, rich history, that they were acquired with an intention to demolish, as opposed to what seems to be perhaps a lack of creative professional guidance to guide a cooperative and compatible blend that marries the old and the new. These are not mutually exclusive goals. Unlike the greater East Raleigh South Park National Historic District, which has been absolutely obliterated since it was designated in 1990, there has not been one single demolition that has occurred in Prince Hall since it was created 10 years ago. We're coming up on our decade anniversary in the next couple months. Though, unfortunately, we know that that will most likely not always be the case. Over the past decade, we have been fortunate to have 3 threatened historically African-American houses relocated to vacant parcels within the district, 2 of which were adaptively used for guest lodging, and all of which fell under the purview of the COA process. The HOD in the COA process hasn't prevented a dense contemporary condo development from being constructed, adding workforce and market rate housing as well as other infill, but has also not impeded a great number of historic houses, some of them long empty, predating when we arrived in the neighborhood 16 plus years ago, to undergo rehabs that have maintained their exteriors and associated history through the COA process. I will disagree slightly with Mr. Paul's assertion that there's but 1 or 2 commercial buildings existing in the district. That is not the case. There are long shuttered commercial buildings that are on South Person Street, on East Lenoir Street, on South Blunt Streets in particular, including one previously owned by the city that had a tree going up from the roof for the past decade or so before it was sold. And all of those buildings have seen new life breathed into them since the HOD took effect. All of these projects, contemporary and traditional infill, historic rehabs, etc., dispel the fallacy that historic districts are frozen in amber, or that there is a forced stasis within them, which could not be further from the truth. Just within our very small area, it's abundantly clear that getting to a desired end result is very much possible. And in fact, is supported through the HOD and the COA process. But that process goes much smoother when the whole of the community and surely neighbors are considered in these plans. The idea of a historic district is that it is a collection of buildings, that there is not one single solitary resource on an island. I have no doubt that with this consideration and some professional creativity and problem solving, a meaningful project that meets a variety of goals is unequivocally possible without destroying this critical historic district. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Jenny. Mr. Paul, you have about 30 seconds left.
Thank you. I just wanted to note about 90% of the site is currently vacant. And several of you heard, I think, from some of the institutions in the community. Shaw University is here with us tonight, as well as Wallace Green with Tupper Baptist, General Baptist. And Lynette Williams, I think, reached out to you. She was a CAC chair and very involved in the establishment of the National Register District, all noting that they did not want this overlay district placed on them at the time. And it is a constraint, acknowledging that, there are ways to work with it, but I just ask you, is it fair that the folks who have shown through their life's work have to expend the resources and time to do that, to accomplish their dream? Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody on council have a question of the applicant or Ms. Harper? Councilmember Knight?
I think you mentioned this, Mr. Paul. I got a question for you. So Shaw University supports this change?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilmember Branch?
Question, because they mentioned Mr. Wallace Green. I see him here. Could you speak to, because I think you represent some of the other properties in this district, can you speak to the impact of this overlay has had?
Madam Mayor, thanks for the opportunity.
Wallace Green, 6800 Woodhaven Court in Raleigh. About 2005, this council created the Raleigh Area Development Authority, and I was honored for 15 years to represent RADA. And our role was to work on the economic bridges that are needed, investment in Southeast Raleigh specifically. And we were encouraged by the community to focus on the community institutions, the churches, the existing homeowners and landowners, historical, who by circumstance of history owned significant property downtown. Much of it was commercial, as along particularly the 500 block of South Blunt. So I have developed relationships with Tupper and Shaw, of course, and many of the landowners in this area, all of whom opposed the original designation of this historic district. And I'm just so proud of Bobby and Rosalind for what they've done, because they represent what we were about. If you look at the example of the General Baptist Convention, which came to us and said, we want to stay downtown at the corner of Wilmington and Lenoir. We want to stay downtown, and African-American owned land, wants to stay here, owned the adjacent property was also owned by African-Americans who bought that, hopefully for some kind of future economic gain. And I brought together the General Baptist and the adjacent African-American landowners, and we created a site for a hotel. And this council, in its wisdom, responded in support of rolling back that historic districts to facilitate the development of a hotel which will be under construction sometime this year. What happens out of that is you get 100-year sustainability for the General Baptist Convention, because we brought the land to that transaction in exchange for a position on that property and in that building. Sustainability. And we have been about that throughout that area in advising and assisting in helping folks to realize some economic benefit from their historic role as owners on that property, and not simply to be subjected to having to sell it as the property values go up. But can they be a partner? Can they be a co-developer? And that's what we've been about for 15 years.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions?
I had asked staff earlier the question.
Okay, I'm closing the hearing if I haven't already done so. So hearing is closed.
So this is the application of the rezoning. The overlay was Z2111. The first reading was March 20 of 2012, and it was approved by a split vote, 5-3. Weeks, Baldwin, and Odom opposed. And the second reading, April 3rd, was the same vote.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And
The
most of
reason-
I had to read the minutes, so like I won the escape room challenge tonight. I had to read the minutes. Most of the conversation recorded in the minutes, thank you, Ms. Smith, is about the Stronach Alley in the block on the west side of the district.
All right.
And there was opposition from the community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mayor, I'm ready to make a motion if no one else has any questions. The thing I want to say is it's interesting, and Mr. Green mentioned this about the hotel. When it came time for the hotel, the council, and I think the only person on the council at the time in 2015 was you, Madam Mayor, voted to remove the overlay for the hotel. And now we're talking about a daycare to help young people grow and get a head start. And, you know, we're trying to say, well, no, we shouldn't remove an overlay. And I find that quite interesting as far as the opposition. But I will say this, I think both sides have made their points. Both sides have said some things that made me think about their points. But in the end, I moved to adopt the proposed consensus statement dated March 1st, 2022, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption effective dates described in the agenda items under recommended action.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. It's approved. And I want to thank you for all you've done for the community. If only everyone was this happy when they left a council meeting.
Councilmember Branch made Bynum go look all that stuff up, and you had all the information already. You were here.
I was here.
Well, I knew she had it, but exactly.
Keep doing good work. Thank you. I'm waiting for the doors to close, so. No, that was not jeering, that was cheering. There is a difference. Okay. Now we will go to the next hearing, which is rezoning Z4321, majority of the block, well, on Hargett, Salisbury, Martin, McDowell, known as the former NNO site.
Yes, ma'am, this is just southeast of where we are this evening. The request is to rezone 3.3 acres. The change here is an entitlement in height. They're going from 20 stories to 40 stories. The base district, the frontage are not changing. There are no conditions offered here. This is a general use case. It is consistent with the future land use map and the 2030 comprehensive plan, and Planning Commission recommends approval. In case you haven't already walked by the site today, I think I've only been by like 3 times. Here's where it is. It's on the east side of Nash Square. A couple of views of the site. Again, the change here is the height entitlement, and what that means is that a lot more residential units would be feasible. And there should be another slide here that also says a lot more commercial and retail entitlement would also be possible. Consistent with the plan overall, Planning Commission recommends approval. Happy to answer any questions for you before you open the hearing.
Any questions for Bynum? Okay, no questions. Once again, I'm going to ask, is anybody here, I know the applicant is here, is anybody here to speak in favor or in opposition? In favor, could you raise your hands? Anyone in opposition? Okay. This will be a quick hearing. Let's put up 8 minutes and we will have the applicant.
Good evening, Mac Paul, 421 Fayetteville Street. I'll be quick. I'm here on behalf of the acquisition group. They're a California-based company, but they have longtime Raleigh ties. They've owned 2 Hanover for almost 30 years, and their business model is long-term holders. They invest in their buildings for long-term sustainable value, and you can see that from the improvements to BB&T building with its greater pedestrian engagement with Civic Plaza, among other things that they've done. They were excited in 2018 to have the opportunity to acquire such a prominent site, and they recognize the importance of this site in Raleigh. It's just across from Nash Square. Huge opportunity, huge need for redevelopment. And so they engaged a strong local development team with East West Partners and Gensler Architects and started working on plans in 2019. They have gotten a lot of feedback from officials with the city about the design and greater engagement, internal loading, and they've gone through a number of iterations with the project. At all times, the plan does include a mix of uses of hotel, multifamily, condo, retail, and office. The pandemic created an opportunity to pause the project and to further consider changes to it, but it also made them realize that by going from 20 to 40 stories, it could even further improve the development. So I'm just going to hit a few of these illustrations. Note this is illustrative of the prior plan, so this will change if you are kind enough to approve this rezoning request. This is the office looking from Salisbury Street. You can see the active street frontage, and then looking from Nash Square, the corner of McDowell and Martin Street, and then just more of an evening shot. But look at these plans, and you've seen this on some larger sites downtown that accommodate more than one building, and they're zoned for 20 stories. All of the buildings go right to 20 stories. So by alleviating that cap, no, you won't see all the buildings go to 40 stories, but there'll be an opportunity to have variable heights. You'll be able to raise some of the loading on the ground level to an upper level and have even more open space. And there's a pedestrian pass through going east-west through the site. and having smaller floor plates with taller buildings. So it gives you a number of design improvements through that flexibility that we would ask respectfully for you to consider with this rezoning request, and ultimately more ground level activity, which is really what we want to see. As you heard, it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. We respectfully ask for your support and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for the applicant? Councilmember Buffkin?
Thank you, Mayor. So, if I remember right, the previous plans had several, what I'll call problems, maybe challenges is a better way to put it. There were things like dumpsters on adjacent to sidewalks, the potential for delivery trucks making three-point turns on Hargett Street. Has it been redesigned to eliminate those concerns?
That's correct, and that's with the prior plan. There was originally a thought of a grocer, which is a large footprint facing Salisbury Street where you had loading off of Salisbury, and that created some consternation in terms of the things you're talking about. So with these later plans, it did internalize the loading, but with a greater height, there's still some back of office that, because it's the parking structure is still compressed because you have to fit a lot in 20 stories. That would even allow those like 25-foot, there are a couple of 25-foot spaces on Martin and Salisbury that are essentially back of house that you can raise to a higher level with the greater height. But yes, those improvements and that feedback was very helpful.
Yes, I remember we did provide feedback and changes were made. So they listened, which is good news. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, I'll look around again. Is there anyone here who would like to speak on this? Okay, I'm going to close the hearing. Do we have a motion? Councilmember Branch?
Pull it right here. I was looking at the background information. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated March 1st, 2022, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda items under recommended action.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Wait, excuse me one second, Councilmember Buffkin.
Yeah, just a comment on the motion. I support the motion. I think it's a good project. And my memory is that several of these 40-story zoning cases have come in front of us, and every one of them's got approved. I think we're nearing the time when it's time to take a look at downtown zoning and send a more definite signal that this is where we want tall buildings. So, I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking about bringing that to council soon. Thank you.
Okay, all in favor? Can I see everybody's hands, please? Okay, thank you. That was unanimous, clerk. Thank you. Next, we have rezoning Z5621, 216 Cameron Street.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, great. I could see it over here, but it wasn't up. So this is a request to rezone 1.11 acres from CX5 to CX7. The frontage remains the same. They're adding some conditions. This is a portion of the block bounded by Smallwood, Woodburn, Cameron, and Daniels, the northeast corner. Formerly the site of the K&W cafeteria. This is consistent with future land use map and the comprehensive plan, and the Planning Commission recommends approval. So here's a look at that site. I think we all are familiar with the Village District. And just to help you visualize, the CX7 is that northeastern corner. The remainder of the block remains at CX5 with the urban limited frontage and no conditions. And so what they are doing here is prohibiting a handful of uses that no one would want in the Village District, requiring some screening for structured parking, requiring parapet walls on all the floors of parking structures, and regulating light in those structures. So the change here, the maximum number of residential units, office space, all goes up. Again, consistent with the comprehensive plan overall. Some notes here around open space, contextual design, just because that a lot of that is not addressed by the conditions. They focus mostly on the parking structure issue, but again, consistent overall, and the Planning Commission recommends approval. What questions could I answer for you before you open the public hearing?
Any questions? Okay, I'm going to ask, is anybody here to speak on this matter? In favor?
Yes, I'm here on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, can I just see if there's anyone here to speak in opposition? Okay, we will, if we could get 8 minutes on that, I will open the hearing.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Jennifer Ashton. I'm an attorney with Longleaf Law Partners. I'm here on behalf of the applicant tonight. I'm also joined by the developer of this project, Quality Oil. Rodney Cheek is here. And then also I have Paul Mugnana and Adam Jolly from Regency Centers. They are the managers of the Village District. I'm going to keep my comments brief just because Bynum did a great job explaining our project and the fact that no one else is here in opposition as well. But as Bynum mentioned, we are seeking to rezone about 1.13 acres of the Village District, the old K&W cafeteria site. The rest of that side of the district is going to be staying the same at that CX5. We are asking to go to CX7, and we're keeping the frontage the same at Urban Limited. Our proposal here, we are hoping to do a hotel project. As you know, the Village District is a great place to shop and dine and hang out, but there is not really an opportunity to stay on the property. So we're hoping that by adding a hotel amenity, it will really complement the other uses in the district, and that will help also reduce vehicle miles traveled for people who want to come and stay for a weekend or longer and not have to travel back and forth to a hotel. So as Bynum did mention, we are consistent with the future land use map and the comp plan overall, and we did receive a unanimous recommendation of approval from the Planning Commission. And with that, we're here to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you. I did see some people walk in. We are on rezoning Z5621. Is anyone here to speak on that matter? Okay. All right. Then I am going to close the hearing. Do we have a motion? Councilmember Fort?
Yes, it's my motion to approve. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated March 1st, 2022, containing the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommend action.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Unanimous, clerk. Thank you. Next, we have text change 5821, zoning conditions. This is Falls Valley Drive.
Yes, ma'am. This is a text change to zoning conditions that would modify the planned development district that governs this area. The zoning map would not change, but the regulations that control development on the site would. So this is a request to rezone or to modify the zoning conditions for 3.2 acres of the PD. It's consistent with the future land use map and the 2030 comprehensive plan, and the Planning Commission does recommend approval. So this is on the north side of 540, just east of Falls of the Neuse Road. Currently undeveloped area. A couple of views of the site. So what they are doing here, they're adding a new phase 5 to the PD, applying commercial mixed use as the base district here, prohibiting a handful of some of the most intense uses, limiting building height overall to 5 stories, limiting hours of operation. And then they have added a particular condition here in regards to the corner of the parcel adjacent to Coxendale Drive. There's residential across the street from Coxendale, across the street from the site. And so they're limiting height there to 3 stories and 50 feet. So you can see the area here that would be governed by that. So the residential lots are on the north, I guess we'll call that the north up on this drawing. The 3 lots across Coxendale from the area shown in yellow here, which would further limit height. So the residential entitlement is going up here, not quite 50%, and then they're adding office and retail entitlement here. So previously, development in this area, the PD was limited to residential only. It is consistent with the plan overall. minor inconsistency here around ancillary retail use. And again, the Planning Commission recommends approval. What questions could I answer for you before you open the hearing?
Any questions? Okay, is there anyone here to speak on this matter? Okay, let's see. In favor?
For the applicant, yes.
Okay, could I have, whoever wants to speak, could you come up? Who's in favor? Is there anybody in opposition? Let me ask that. Okay, if you could come up, you have 6 minutes. No, wait a minute. Oh, you're new on this one. You were here on the last one, too. Okay, I'm getting it. Okay. All right. Go.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Jennifer Ashton again, Longleaf Law Partners, on behalf of the applicant, the property owner. This is for a text amendment to an existing master plan. The existing plan development is called Falls Ridge PD. The property is about 3.2 acres in size. It's currently vacant. It was phase 1 of the Falls Ridge PD. It was supposed to be built out first. That did not happen, and I'll explain a little more in a moment why I think that is the case. We are seeking to amend the master plan, primarily to do 2 things. One, to raise the height on a portion of the site from 3 stories to 5 stories. And then the other modification is to allow some low-impact, non-residential uses to come into the property. I do want to spend just a moment explaining why we're making this request. This plan development has been in place since 2000, and as I mentioned earlier, this was supposed to be phase 1 of the project. It never built out. Some reasons that we believe it did not build out were because of the site configuration itself. As you can see, it is a very odd-shaped site. There is also a 70-foot transmission line that runs to the south of the property, all along its southern border in 540. Another limiting factor here is that when this PD was first established in 2000, there was a 100 dwelling unit cap put on it. Over time, the property owner has explored different options for multifamily developments, whether that be townhomes or apartments, and given that low dwelling unit yield, they just have not been able to attract a developer to have a viable project. We are in a housing market right now that is, everyone's trying to build residential, but at the same time, you have to balance that with construction costs and labor costs. And when you're only getting 100 unit yield or less when you add all of the site constraints in, it's just not making for a viable project. So again, we are trying to increase height on a portion of the site to 5 stories to hopefully get some more residential units if that's the type of development we're able to attract. If not, we're asking to open it up to some low impact non-residential uses so we can either do a non-residential project or a mixed use project. As Bina mentioned, we are consistent with the future land use map and we are consistent with the comp plan overall. There is no urban form guidance for this particular site. However, Coxendale Drive does come into play, which I'll talk about more in just a minute with height. As you can see here, this is a good example of that 70-foot transmission line that does run to the south of our site, which makes it very difficult to do a development that covers the entire site. Bynum did mention as well that we have limited out 15 non-residential uses, mostly based on neighbor feedback during the neighborhood meetings. We tried to target the uses that were considered more high impact commercial uses, things like hotels, bars and restaurants, gas stations, vehicle fuel or vehicle repair. A lot of those came out during the neighborhood meetings, in particular the hotel use. A lot of the neighbors were against having a hotel there, so we went ahead and prohibited that. And then, as I mentioned, Coxendale Drive is not on the city's street plan, but staff has indicated that they would consider it more of like a neighborhood yield street. And there is a policy in the comprehensive plan that says when you're on a neighborhood street, height along that street, along that frontage, should be limited to 3 stories in height. So we have added a condition to ensure that height along Coxendale Drive is limited to 3 stories, which is allowed under the master plan today. We're actually reducing the total height. The master plan currently allows 52 feet in height. We're reducing that down to 50 feet in height. The benefit of creating this yellow triangle here as well allows us to keep the height at 3 stories adjacent to those 2 single-family homes to the east. So that was an added benefit of this condition. And with that being said, we are consistent with the future land use map comp plan overall, and we're compatible with the surrounding areas, and the Planning Commission did unanimously recommend approval. And I'm here tonight with a representative for the property owner, and we're happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions of the applicant? Okay, if anybody would like to speak in favor in addition to the applicant, please raise your hand. Okay, anybody who would like to speak in opposition, please raise your hand. Okay, if you could come to the front. There's an 8-minute time limit. So there's 2 of you, I believe, coming up to speak. Leave each other some time. Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Phil John Fatone. I live at 2109 Coxendale, which is one of the impacted properties right across the street. We had bought this property back in 2006 or 2007. We had bought it from Falls Ridge Partnership under the assumption that this was supposed to be townhomes. We are now facing this dilemma of 5-story office retail. We are, this street is a cut-through street, this Coxendale, which turns into Falls Drive. There's been numerous amount of office buildings that are there now, closest to Falls Ridge, that are Falls of the Noose Road, and they are, most of them are vacant, they're empty. We just found out a month ago that the Walgreens on the corner of Falls and Falls Valley is actually leaving. We don't feel that there's any room for any more impact. Like I said, this is a cutoff street that goes from Litchford right through up to Falls, so we have a lot of traffic in the morning, people cutting to get onto the 540, and of course in the afternoon. It's a residential neighborhood. I'm not sure why a lot more of the neighbors are not here tonight, but there's been a bunch of meetings, and we are concerned about the heights. We are okay with townhomes, but we're not okay with anything of 5-story, or originally they were talking about a hotel, and now of course they don't want, because the neighbors had spoken up, they're not interested in a 5-story hotel. But we're okay with having residential homes in this residential neighborhood, but we are not, the impact of what this is going to do to the street and to the already impact that we're getting from the 540 is just, I don't know. We would love to have some kind of an impact study to see if this is actually what is available to this neighborhood. That's really what we're concerned about. Thank you for the opportunity to talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, Jeff Hastings. We're at 8801 Colesbury Drive, which we're at the intersection of Coxendale and Colesbury. So our house isn't adjacent, and we can't really necessarily see the property, but our neighbors across the street are adjacent to what they're talking about. I'll be honest, I appreciate some of the comments that we got tonight, because prior to this evening, it was up to 5 stories, up to 5 stories, up to 5 stories, and that, quite frankly, does not meet the comprehensive plan. And the other thing is the original plan was for 100 housing units on what used to be 12.3 acres. Now it's 3.2 acres. As Phil said, our neighborhood is turned over. We have a ton of little kids because we live on that corner. We have commercial trucks coming through even though it's prohibited. People don't stop at the stop sign. It's very detrimental to our neighborhood already. And if they add whatever they do unit-wise on a small parcel of ground like that, it could be catastrophic for where we live. Not as much for property values and things like that, but the people that live in our subdivision, the children, the pets, all those things. So you have to see the traffic flow like my wife and I do every day, and to have 100 more units of anything and or retail would have a hugely negative impact on our subdivision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else here to speak? Okay, I'm going to close the hearing. Any additional questions?
Mayor?
Yes.
I'd like to ask the staff to get us some analysis on the traffic conditions and potential eligibility under the neighborhood traffic calming program. You know, I'm sympathetic to those concerns. I've heard you, and I'd like to get some feedback on that from the staff.
Sure, we can bring that back for you.
Great, thank you.
Absolutely, yeah.
So are you asking to hold this?
No, ma'am.
So,
I want a follow-up report on the traffic conditions in the
Yeah.
neighborhood.
so are you asking us to hold
And the
this?
manager's report would be fine.
But are you asking us to
No,
hold
ma'am, I'm
this?
not.
Okay. Okay, do we have a motion then?
Yes.
Okay.
So I think what we've heard tonight is this is a compromise. This is, you know, after 20 years of this PD, the site nobody's been able to develop it. With the reduction to 3 stories, I think it's a good compromise. And so I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated March 1, 2022, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment with the adoption and effective dates described in the agenda item under recommended action.
Do we have a second? Councilmember Knight has seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, Councilmember Cox was opposed. Thank you. And next we have our last case, which is rezoning Z5921 Wade Avenue.
Yes, ma'am, this is a request to rezone just over an acre from R4 to R6. The request is consistent with the future land use map, the urban form map, and the comprehensive plan overall. Planning Commission recommends approval. This is on the north side of Wade Avenue, just east of its intersection with Canterbury Road, and the dead-end street to the north is Wells Avenue. So there is a single-family house on the parcel now. It's also got a lot of trees on it. And here's a view from the street. So they are proposing a handful of conditions here. They're proposing a 100-foot principal building setback from the northern property line. So deference to those Wells Avenue property owners that back up to this lot. They have said no tree disturbing activity in that same 100-foot setback, except for activity authorized by the city, state, or federal government, and that the property would be developed with no more than 8 dwelling units per acre. Remember, they're going from I think this is actually, yeah. And so remember now with the missing middle text change that that's been adopted, and the possibility for duplex and accessory dwelling unit, they could get more than the 6 per acre, and so they're specifying no more than 8 units per acre. So here's what that looks like. The the front setback is reduced. The rear setback is increased by this proposal. It is consistent with the plan overall, and the Planning Commission does recommend approval. What questions could I answer for you before you open the public hearing?
Any questions? Councilmember Knight?
Yes, could you go back to the, I think it's the conditions.
Yes, sir.
Number 2, the word authorized, in this case, does that mean required?
I would need to read, this is a summary of the conditions. Let me read the specifics while you hear from the applicant, and I can give you a better answer.
Any other questions? Okay, once again, I'm going to ask, who is here to speak in favor? Who is here to speak in opposition? Okay, I'm going to ask you to come to the front, please, if you're here to speak. We'll start with the applicant.
Good evening, Mayor Baldwin, members of council. Toby Coleman with Smith Anderson, 150 Fayetteville Street, on behalf of the applicant Raleigh Custom Homes. Really good to be with you in person. So Bynum did a good job. Let's see, are we clicking or using the clicking? Okay. All right. Bynum did a good job of summarizing this. Again, the goal here is really to permit townhomes. Current zoning is 4 units maximum with no townhomes, and it's going to an 8 units maximum. That's because the missing middle text change makes R6 not the limit number anymore, and townhomes are permitted. One of the things we heard was when we had our neighborhood meeting was that the neighbors on Wells Avenue were very concerned. One of the things they were very concerned about was that the existing property provides a buffer for them from Wade Avenue, from the noise and of the traffic and the sight of traffic. And they're concerned about losing the trees on this property backing up to them. And so that's why we proposed the zoning conditions that we proposed 100-foot setback, which is about significantly larger, about 5 times larger than the required 20-foot setback in R6 and 3 times larger than what's currently required. And we also added no tree disturbing activity in the 100-foot rear setback area. The idea there, Councilor Knight, is we wanted the condition more or less mirrors the tree protection provisions of the code without declaring it tree protection area, right? So it sort of mirrors that in concept. We will note, you may hear you did see that there are some neighbors here. We did hear concerns and complaints about traffic on Wade Avenue. And, the truth is this property is on Wade Avenue. There's not much we can do about it. We will note that, there wasn't a TIA required, but in the staff report, staff does do a initial traffic analysis. They determined that this development would add about 1 additional trip at the peak hours. So both AM and PM. So not a significant addition of traffic. We are available for questions as you may see fit.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. We'll save your time at 5:28.
I got a question, sorry, I'm slow moving.
Okay.
Mr. Coleman, they just said 1 more.
That's a question for staff.
Yeah, okay.
It's one per peak in the peak hours. So one per hour in the AM peak hour.
But going to 8 potential units.
Right.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Staff.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's hear from, could we set the timer at 8 minutes? Please come up. Remember, there's 8-minute limit. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Ashley Stanley. I live at 2621 Wells Avenue, which is directly behind this property. My husband and I moved into our home 18 years ago, and we moved onto Wells Avenue because we loved the quiet dead-end street. We loved the natural area behind the home. We have deer in our backyard. We've had foxes born in our backyard, and the redevelopment of this property is going to change a lot of that. We're completely against this rezoning. At the very first meeting, the builder, in his own words, said to us on more than one occasion, only half of this lot is buildable. Only half of this lot is buildable. So their 100-foot setback is so generous. they're saying that because they can't build on that part. There's a steep, steep incline. There's a creek that runs back there. We also asked if anyone had done an impact study for creek runoff and if this was a protected creek, because it is drainage for all of our properties. We heard no information. We got no answers for any of that information. If it's only buildable on half, that's a half an acre. You should not have 8 townhomes on a half an acre. We also were told that it would be a maximum of 6, and now all of a sudden it's changed to 8. Wade Avenue is one of the most dangerous and busy roads in our city. Not only are they proposing to put 6 to 8 townhomes here, someone also approved 321 apartments on Grant Avenue in the middle of our residential neighborhood. That is going to be at least 500 more cars coming from our streets onto Wade Avenue. So it's not just this that's going to impact it. It's already being impacted by all of that. I'm so frustrated by what we're seeing in the city right now. The people who've lived there for years and years are getting nothing. We're allowed to come and speak, and then we're shut down. Everything is in the builder's favor, and it's got to stop. Something has to change. The argument that this rezoning will provide greater housing choice and by increasing supply, improve housing affordability is absurd. Housing prices in our area are out the roof, and a $750,000 to $850,000 townhome is not affordable to anyone. Most people. I apologize. Most people. And that was one of their arguments. Thank you.
Okay, next.
Move this up a little bit. Hi, I'm Beckett Wagner. I live at 262 Ford, which is the property immediately to the left of this property. I just want to talk about a few concerns. The first, which you're not going to be able to see on this map, is actually this property is on top of a hill. So just before coming here, my fiance and I came from grocery shopping, and we went to take a left into our property. And it's a left turn that I will likely not make when I have children in the car. It is very close. People go very fast on Wade Ave, and I'm the property to the left of the hill. This is the property on top of the hill. So talking about 8 units, families of 4, 30 people living on top of that hill, I have genuine concerns for their safety and their ability to take a left turn or a right turn into that property. There is no sidewalk, there is no crosswalk, there is no stoplight. This is a dangerous thing to do for the people that would move there. And for someone who maybe, as you know, with COVID, people are signing up for houses sight unseen. I genuinely think without a sidewalk, a crosswalk, without a light, that this is not something that we should do for the street. I am all in favor of affordable housing. If they said that they were going to put 8 units under the median house price of North Carolina, I would honestly probably shut down my concerns for the greater community and allow them to do that despite my concerns. But putting 8 units close to $1 million on that property, that is rich people trying to get more rich by circumventing the rules that you guys put out to try to help people that are more disadvantaged. There's also a significant amount of trees on that property that if you guys went there, you would be in awe of the size and the stature of those trees. And I think they're going to wipe them. They said 100 feet in the back. That undershoots how many trees also come closer to the property as well. I have really great concerns on taking down those trees, the bird life. There is no environmental study done on this. And without further guidance on that, I don't know how we can possibly make a decision on changing the zoning of this lot. Again, my fiance and I are planning on living in that house for about 15 to 20 years. We're going to start a family there. I know this is a decision that you'll make for 15 minutes. You'll hear all the testimony and you'll make your decision, but something that we're going to have to live with for the rest of our lives. And I just want you guys to make sure that, I know it's the end of the day, we're all tired. I know you guys had a doozy at the beginning of the day, but please take this seriously. We're taking this very seriously. And for our sakes and the people that would live there, let's hopefully make the right decision here.
Thank you. We have 2 minutes, 51 seconds left.
Hello, my name is Alice Lynn. I live at 2619 Wells Avenue. I live next to Ashley and catty corner to this proposed rezoning. I've lived in this house for 11 years, in Raleigh for 14. And we are all here on behalf of many of our neighbors on Wells Avenue, on Canterbury, on Wade, across from Wade. many of whom could not be here tonight, but have consistently been present at the meetings, at the neighborhood meeting, at the planning commissioners meeting, and bringing up these concerns. And I really have to emphasize the traffic issue and the environmental issue, which have not been addressed fairly in our minds at all. And I would like to ask the council, who has gone east on Wade Avenue from 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock in the morning and 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the evenings at peak rush hour, not even talking about other rush hours? I'd like to know who regularly travels that road, because we do. I'd love to see a show of hands to see who has regularly traveled that, to know how dangerous that stretch of Wade is, to the extent that I never go and try to turn left towards my house during any of those hours, because, as people have said, you're coming up a hill when you're trying to turn left on Wade. There's a lot of traffic. If you're actually going to ask people to turn left a little further down now, it's going to back up traffic that doesn't have a left turn lane like it does on Brooks. There's no crosswalk, there's no street lights, there's no walking lights. It's not safe. It is not walkable to J.C. Park 3 minutes away. It is 3 minutes by car. Walking, which I do multiple times with my family, is a 15 or 20-minute walk, because you have to walk all the way around. There's a lot of impact from this potential rezoning, and we urge you to consider this further. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the applicant care to address any of the concerns raised? I think there was, how much time left? 6 minutes in.
28. I'll just note that, again, this is consistent with the future land use map. It's consistent with the goals of the missing middle text change. It is on a busy corridor where, frankly, probably more density is appropriate. And it is consistent with a number of other developments on this block. As was noted in the staff report, there's a number of similar sort of missing middle developments in the area. Again, what ultimately goes there will ultimately be determined in part by the market. What I will note is that we are in a severe crunch. I don't have to tell you that. I think what was telling about that, I'm sure most of you saw the video in the News and Observer a few days ago of people lining up for houses. We need houses, and this is something that where it's appropriate. It provides it in an area where it can handle the traffic. It's a minimal amount of additional traffic, and it addresses some of the concerns of the neighbors regarding setbacks and other things.
Could you address the tree conservation area again?
Sure. So the tree conservation area, again, we've provided what we heard at the neighborhood meeting. So we came into the neighborhood meeting proposing R6. And we didn't have a specific additional setback beyond the R6 standards. Neighbors at the neighborhood meeting told us they were very concerned about losing the trees and the wildlife corridor that runs in the middle of that block. There is some significant topography there. It is it's stormwater channel. Whether it's a blue line stream, we don't know. Nobody quite knows that. It's certainly a stormwater channel, whether, again, so, we told the neighbors at the time, look, this is probably going to be preserved regardless. Neighbors are very concerned about it, so one of the things we wanted to do was make sure that neighbors knew that this was going to be protected. One of the reasons we put in the condition regarding tree disturbing area was, again, to ensure that neighbors who were concerned about, frankly, grading of the site knew that there would be some protection for their backyards. Again, that would not be provided if somebody came in under R4, either doing a duplex or otherwise.
Okay, do we have any additional questions for the applicant or any of the speakers?
I have one for staff, but not for the applicant. So.
Okay, fine.
Well, it may be more so for somebody from transportation if there's anybody here. Okay. I mean, Bynum, feel free to stand up there if you want to. I mean, So the neighbors have raised issues about sidewalks and traffic impacts and I guess traffic signals and things along those lines. Has there been any analysis done on the Wade Avenue corridor since there have been a number of projects brought onto that area?
I am not aware of any recent analysis of the Wade Avenue corridor. And as you see in your backup, this rezoning case didn't warrant an analysis because it's a very minor increase. I can certainly look into that, but I'm not aware of any recent analysis.
And I guess the question is, if there's going to be more dense projects brought online, would I guess more comprehensively, would that warrant further analysis? Not just this particular project, but everything more comprehensively. Would that warrant some type of analysis?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could certainly look at the corridor. There's probably a lot of history looking at it that, frankly, I don't have as a newer staff member. You know, on infill corridors, a lot of times what we see is that traffic doesn't actually change when new projects come in because people might be driving from somewhere else and now they're closer, but, you know, it's definitely something we could look at.
Okay, and I guess they raised the issue about sidewalks and some connectivity to be able to get to the park. Is that something that could be evaluated as well?
Yeah,
Okay.
Absolutely.
Would that come in a city manager's report, Madam City Manager, or?
We can do that, yes.
Okay, all right. Somebody's waving at me from the back. I don't know. I'm sorry?
Yeah, thumbs up.
Are you a resident who wants to speak? Yes.
A little over a minute left.
Yes. Name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, Keith Coleman, 2625 Wells Avenue. I'm also behind the property. I guess where I'm getting confused and ask a dumb question is who actually owns Wade Avenue? Is this a Wake County, a state? How are studies done?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Is that state? Is that local?
It's a state-maintained road.
So how do we contact the state?
Well, the city coordinates with the state on corridors that are maintained by the state, so we could certainly work with them if we evaluated the road.
Okay.
It's one.
Member Branch.
Yeah, one question for staff, transit related. Currently, they could have 4 residential units. They're looking to go up to 8. From a traffic analysis, what's the difference of 4 by right now and 8, what they're proposing?
In terms of the projected trips, there's a difference of 1 trip during the peak hour. 1 additional trip would be expected from 8 units over what would be expected from 4 units during the peak hour.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
So if we could answer my question on the authorized, what that means, is it, you know, the required, and then also to follow up, I guess, on the traffic questions, it's from what it could be under current zoning to what it is going to be is just that small difference. Is that right? Not what it actually, because there's a single-family home on it right now. Is that right? Correct. Yeah. Okay. So it's what it could be under current zoning to what it could be under the new rezoning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Could be 4.
And then your question about authorized tree disturbance activity. So there's a section in the code in our UDO, section 9.1.6, permitted tree disturbing activities, that calls out what is allowed. And then because there is at least intermittent water, if not a blue line stream on the north side of the site, there may be federal wetland or state regulations that they would be subject to. And so what this condition is saying is that they are limiting themselves to what would be allowed by those regulations, either at the state or federal level that regulate riparian area. And in the case of the city, they're subjecting themselves to the permitted tree disturbing activity list in the code, section 9.1.6, specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And one last question. I have not heard anybody talk about stormwater. It does sound like there is femoral or a creek that runs, femoral creek or something that runs back there.
Right.
What are we doing
It's
about
not
stormwater?
it's not a USGS Blue Line waterway, but there is, I think because of the topography, there is at least intermittent water there. And I was just going to look at the, there's no documented downstream impacts here currently. Okay.
Currently, meaning from the current use or currently from what would happen?
So downstream impacts are typically documented by complaint, and what that means is we don't have any active or historical complaints about stormwater in this area.
From the current use?
Correct.
Okay. But no analysis has been done on?
That is correct. No analysis has been done.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, I'm going to close the hearing. Do we have a motion?
It would be my motion, and certainly with the follow-up as relates to the traffic and sidewalks and those things. It's my motion to approve. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated March 1st, 2022, containing the agenda materials, and approve the zoning amendment.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, that was Councilmember Melton.
Second, sorry.
Thank you. All right, all in favor, please raise your hands.
Aye.
Those opposed? Councilmember Cox and Knight are opposed. Okay, thank you. And then, as Councilmember Fort requested, we will be getting a report on traffic and sidewalks and other opportunities to make the area more walkable. Okay. All right, well, that is it for this evening. Everybody, thank you for being here. And it's nice to be back in person. We are adjourned.